So let me tell you about this documentary.
Okay.
It's actually about something called the men's rights movement.
Oh, okay.
Have you heard of that?
I haven't, but I understand all about enforced masculinity, so I get that, yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
So the men's rights movement, or MRAs, men's rights advocates,
Okay.
actually despise feminists.
Ah, okay.
And they believe that feminism has actually stripped rights away from men, or how women have made advances through feminism, men haven't.
Okay.
And that they're discriminated against in ways that people don't talk about.
Okay.
So this film is looking at what their perspective is, and my story is actually part of the film. I'm a feminist and have been for my entire adult life, and so I'm trying to look at what they're saying and understand it, but having a little bit of a difficulty.
Not surprising.
Yeah. So, well, first of all, what do you think of the men's rights movement, what you know of it?
I don't know that much about it, to be honest with you, since I teach it from a feminist perspective as it is. So for me, it's a little bit more difficult to kind of wrap my head around a men's rights movement. But what I do understand about it is that men come to the table with their own form of socialization, which constrains their behavior because they sanction each other in ways that, women sanction each other for femininity, men do the same. So from that perspective, I can kind of see maybe where they're coming from, but, women need to empower themselves too, and to, in order to get out of their own boxes. So that's kind of the way I see it. I don't really know specifically about that, though.
Can you explain to me again what you teach?
I teach sociology, and then currently just teaching a social problems course.
And you focus on gender studies?
We don't just focus on gender. We talk about economic inequality. We talk about race and ethnicity, inequalities of that, inequalities within, all of the different institutions that we have in our society. And that, of course, includes gender and sexual orientation and all those other things that relate to that. So
are women still being discriminated against?
Oh, absolutely. And it's not necessarily conscious. Part of the way that we're oppressed is almost like we're oppressed in a way that, okay, I'm not quite sure how I want to say that. So, economically, the fact that we're more nurturing and more caring and we tend to go into those occupations is part of a way that allows us to be oppressed, because that's where our gender gap comes in, our wage gap comes in. We're still seen as less formidable in many ways. And part of that is the fact that, we're socialized to be more collaborative, less competitive. And there's still so much out there in the way of the media and other forms and other institutions that teach us that we're just not as good as men. And it's hard for us to not internalize that. So feminism is a way of empowering women to come to terms with that and to embrace that and to say, okay, we're different, but it's okay. But that doesn't make us unequal and should not, put us in a position to be unequal.
That's a great point, that our natural instincts drive us to do jobs that kind of earn less. I mean, nurturing positions, say caregiver. It almost sounds like maybe those jobs or qualities aren't valued as much.
Right.
The nurturing side, the caring side.
Right, because they're associated with femininity. So the nurturing, the caring, the vulnerability, all of the soft things, the things that we think of as yin, are not valued because they're not masculine. So because our standards are all still based on masculinity and what that means and the strength that is allegedly, right? So what I really liked about this workshop was that it brought out that in a way that even though we can be vulnerable and authentic and be more like water and yin, that is part of our strength. The fact that as caregivers and nurturers, that is our strength. And so when I see a gender wage gap that is, part of that's the way of keeping that devalues women because of those tendencies and then pays them less because of they tend to go into those occupations and we get tracked into those occupations and all of those things that come with that. I can't accept that as a part of, the way I think that the world should work.
Do you think we live in a patriarchy?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The fact that we're competitive and that in society we didn't always live in, if you go back into history, it wasn't always patriarchal. There were times when men and women were considered to be equal, when the world was more sharing and caring and collaborative, and there were societies that had completely different values than we do today, than this drive for money and drive for competitiveness and drive for being the best and achievement and all of those things, where we really worked together more and men and women were equal. And when that changed, right? So yes, absolutely, we live in more of a patriarchy now than we ever did. And I think money fuels that, and I think our need for achievement fuels that, and I think that those aren't necessarily bad things, but the directions that we're sent to achieve those things, women into more caring occupations, men into more the mathematical and engineering and things like that, I think that's part of it, because those are the things that shows us what we value about men and about women.
As far as the genders go, who do you think holds the power and why?
Well, I don't think I could be a feminist without thinking that men are holding the power, because I wouldn't need to feel a drive to fight for equal rights if I didn't feel that there was one that had more domination tendencies than the other. So I would have to say that men still hold the power because the standards that are set in our society are still according to what men can do and what masculinity means. And as long as that's the standard, and as long as there are institutions and structures in place that keep it there, then, but that doesn't mean that we can't find the power and change that. It just means that we have to work together a little bit more as women, and I think we can fix that.
Why did you become a feminist?
Why did I become a feminist? I don't know. It just seemed like a natural extension of my thinking processes. I don't roll over and play dead well. I don't submit well. I think my process of becoming a feminist really started when I went into the martial arts, and I started teaching martial arts, and I met women who were teaching women self-defense, and it just kind of evolved. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was an evolution that happened within me as I felt more powerful in learning how to defend myself and in empowering other women to defend themselves and to do all of those things that came with that. And it just became natural to consider myself a feminist. I didn't just open a book one day and say, oh yeah, I want to be that. It's just one of those things that evolved, and that's what I became through that process. And it's been fun. Yeah.
I love being a feminist.
Yeah.
Do you think feminism strips power away from men?
No, not at all. I think that what's hard for a lot of men to wrap their heads around is that as women grow more powerful, we all grow more powerful, because we can work together better when we're more in partnership with each other than when we're fighting against dominating forces, and when we're, one group of people is more subordinate than another. We all grow stronger that way. And I don't think there's any reason to fear feminism. I think it's something that men can embrace just as easily if they understand that it doesn't disempower them, because the proof is in history. When we were all equal, life was beautiful, but we didn't have nearly as much conflict as we do now. And that conflict comes from that domination versus subordination paradigm. So
I could go on with you for hours and days, but I will let you go.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That was
for
fun.
letting us interview you.
I've never done that before. That was interesting.
Really?
Yeah.